Welcome to the final episode in this Power Thought series. This one is very close to my heart. It is my heart. It's the power of sensitivity. So if you're a sensitive human being with big emotions and are deeply empathetic and likely having issues with being too porous, meaning boundaries are a challenge for you, you feel and think deeply, and you have a belief around your nature as too much, too vulnerable, and you have a massive awareness of your difference and lack of belonging, then I'm speaking specifically to you today. My aim is to help you turn the inner conflict and dialogue over sensitivity as weakness into understanding and shifting the narrative to sensitivity as your superpower. Quite a few years ago, back in 2017, I published an article on Elephant Journal, which to my surprise resonated with thousands of readers, over 18,000 to be more precise. It was titled "The 6 Superpowers of Emotionally Sensitive People." And it was around the time I was doing a lot of inner work to understand why I reacted to things the way I did, why I felt so much, why I was affected by everything, why I cared so much, why others didn't care or have the same depth of empathy or kindness, and why others were not like me. It was around the time I was being coached, and through that process I discovered that there was nothing wrong with me, except everything was right with me, and something was wrong with society and my environment. I removed all the toxic people from my life that I could identify, and the veil, so to speak, was lifting because I was starting to shift realities, you can say. I saw that I had particular gifts because of my deep sensitivity and sense of aliveness. I wasn't a burden to myself. Rather, I was a burden to the unawakened, to the sleepwalkers, to the ones who ensure the status quo is maintained, to the ones who are activated by vulnerable energy, to the ones who repress their emotions, to the ones who are aggressive and highly critical and lack self-awareness and self-value. Of course, they will need a scapegoat. Of course, it will be me, because I couldn't betray my highly sensitive nature even if I tried. I imagine you are the scapegoat of your environment, be it at home or at work or anywhere you go perhaps. You're different. You're highly attuned. There is a hypervigilance. You have to work differently. You have a unique lifestyle and a strong need to protect your energy. At that time when I wrote the article, there was a revival of the divine feminine archetypes occurring, and this understanding about sensitivity and the feminine came from timeless wisdom from indigenous cultures. In Jyotish, for example, the moon in one's chart, depending on its quality, is an indicator of deep sensitivity. At that time, I also likened the warrior archetype to this divine feminine power, which is the emotional body. I still agree with this, of course, as the feminine in Sanatana Dharma, my cultural heritage, is the mother divine, the Devi, who, in the form of Durga, is expressed as warrior, as Shakti. In Hatha Yoga, the subtle body, the feminine channel, which holds the lunar energy in the body, is called Ida Nadi. As a highly sensitive person, you're likely to identify as a moon child. So let's remove the colonized conditioning and view and understand that in our dharmic culture, the Devi is supreme. She represents the material world, the earth body, and all that moves, including the mind and emotions. She is the 3 types of Maya, Mahamaya, Yogamaya, and Mohamaya, which implies she is the source of spiritual powers and attachment to this world of forms. These are the superpowers of the highly sensitive soul. But here's the catch. The lack of self-knowledge, the ignorance of one's nature, staying in the delusion that sensitivity is weakness and useless can make life extremely miserable. Not owning your gifts will make you vulnerable to exploitation. But developing consciousness, self-awareness, and one's spiritual cultivation can turn what is perceived to be a curse into a great power. Being aligned to the fundamental forces at work in nature is what turns sensitivity into a superpower. Sanatana Dharma calls these underlying cycles of nature Rita. In a different context, the related term Ritu denotes the cycle of the seasons as well as the menstrual cycle. One such power of sensitivity is the bleed. Colonization meant that our ancient Indian menstrual practices were labeled superstitious and backward because divine feminine embodiment and sacred ancient knowledge was a threat. The irony is that now the Western capitalist market has repackaged and renamed indigenous knowledge systems as embodied feminine and somatic, claiming that these movements are somehow new. It isn't new, they're just repackaged ancient Hindu and other native sciences and practices, which is what the West do to sell its new shiny thing. On the one hand, it's great to see feminine liberation movements happening to undermine the patriarchy. It's necessary and needed to take back the power of one's body. On the other hand, it's annoying because if you're black or brown and rooted in the cultures of the global south, your voice doesn't matter. Your practices are labeled superstitious and backwards. But if you're white and newly, quote, embodied, somehow this somatic teaching is innovative and your voice is the voice of the new age Western woman who's made this new discovery. An example is the book Period Power by Maisie Hill. I know it's a great book which helps the mind and body that is conditioned by patriarchy to return back to healthy ways of understanding menstrual health and the menstruating body. But come on, Ayurveda has taught this for centuries, but because it's from indigenous knowledge and science, it isn't validated until it's repackaged in the garb of Western science. When it's sold back in a corrupted form to its place of origin, for example India, it's quite insulting. Rajiv Malhotra calls this the U-turn theory. Only when the knowledge is taken from its framework and roots and repackaged in a new name and form and hailed as a Western discovery does it become valid and somehow more important. We can see this with the yoga industry. My point is, all of the embodied and somatic movement theories and practices have their origin in indigenous knowledge systems that were systematically colonized, banned, or wiped out. Of course, I'm glad for the uncolonized knowledge to return, but naturally there's anger that this information is only valid when it's removed from its indigenous framework and comes from a white body. The power of the highly sensitive woman will increase when these systems of harm are seen for what they are, and when those complicit within the system will uplift and support BIPOC voices and messages and uncolonize and present knowledge like the moon cycle wisdom with a deeper understanding of its roots and the framework of these teachings. If you learn repackaged moon cycle wisdom from non-indigenous sources, you're never going to learn where this knowledge truly comes from. And because of this white bias, unless you're doing white supremacy work, you're never going to actively choose BIPOC teachers. Note when I talk about whiteness, I'm talking about the construction and fallacy of an idea which presents itself as the authority residing at the center of experience. Sensitive souls miss out on learning ancient wisdom that is deeply embodied through those rooted in their cultures of origin. To be honest, I couldn't get through the book Period Power. The knowledge wasn't new, except for the science of hormones. That was interesting. Overall, though, I felt it was quite a dry read, and like most books that come from white bodies who decontextualize and repackage indigenous knowledge, it actually made me feel disembodied with its presentation and validity through modern Western science, which is still very young and disconnected from mind and body, compared to the depths of, say, yoga, Jyotish, and Ayurveda, truly embodied sciences. I've had this experience whilst doing my PhD in yoga, where secondary material by white men just widened the disconnection with my own culture and the yogic scriptures. It was truly an awful experience. Anyway, women who are connected to their ancestral practices from around the world, and Ayurveda specifically, have long known the importance of the moon and the menstrual cycle for determining the health of one's mental and emotional bodies. My favorite book on this topic is by Sinu Joseph. It's called Ritu Vidya. Please go get your copy. You'll understand why Western feminism is harmful for superimposing universalist ideas and commercial products onto indigenous women from the global south. The author of Ritu Vidya demonstrates how menstrual practices and sacred knowledge from dharmic traditions align with nature and truly support the outer environment, unlike toxic Western products which contribute to carbon impact and climate change. Please see Season 1 of my podcast, Episode 3, titled Narcissism and Colonialism, the Same Demon. It's interesting because some of these folks of the embodied feminine and somatic movement space use the Sanskrit term yoni in their businesses to refer to pleasure, womb health, and the female sexual organ, and yet completely uproot the term from its context, not even talking about its framework within Vedic thought. It creates misinformation and harms the living culture of the Vedas, the people of Sanatana Dharma. Current feminine embodiment and womb knowledge coaches and educators completely bypass their sources of information, possibly unknowingly, sources that include yoga, jyotish, tantra, ayurveda, etc., among other indigenous knowledge systems around the globe. This is important because it's often the highly sensitive that care enough to do this inner work and become womb healers, which is so important today. Anyway, when said healers or coaches talk about the taboo around menstruation, and in particular within the region of the Indian subcontinent, why not talk about the colonial conditioning and practices and thoughts of the invaders which corrupted and sought to erase our teachings? Decolonize, speak the truth, and unlearn Western colonial bias instead of blaming traditional knowledge systems for the state of women's disconnections with their bodies. Disconnection which has been consciously manufactured by those who entered the lands that were rich with knowledge and resources to conquer it, to conquer all, mind, body, and land. This narrative around weakness and women's bodies or feminine energy is a construction by the invaders. Doing the work to uncolonize body, mind, and spirit will strengthen our relationship with ourselves and our sensitivity. Part of decolonial healing is to relearn and strengthen our connection to our own ancestral practices and wisdoms of the body. This is all part of developing self-awareness so that we can view our sensitivity as our superpower. The cycles of the moon mirror our inner cycles. So to shift from victim to powerfully sensitive, start to notice and compare your menstrual cycle with what is happening in the sky. Which nakshatra did your menses commence on? What cycle of the moon? Waxing or waning? New moon or full moon? Your period can reflect what is working and what is not working, and can help you shift towards responsible behaviors and choices for the next cycle. For example, adjustments can be made with sleep, rest, activity, and diet, even relationship choices. The menstrual cycle was held in such high regard, so much that entire temples in India, Bharat, were constructed for the menstruating goddess. Look up the Kamakya temple. The feminine is divine. She is Shakti, the body in which she resides, and her nature is a powerful one. The menstrual cycle was known in certain teachings to be a great purifier. Women didn't need to do hardcore yoga sadhana, as we are goddesses in earthly forms. The natural work to shed and release on all levels of life, mental, emotional, spiritual, physical, is regulated by our own system. The bleed brought the menstruating body closer to the divine by increasing creative and intuitive energies. Being attuned to this power, not taking it for granted, listening to your intuition, your body's wisdom, and taking creative action to meet your needs is what moves you from a victim mindset to an empowered one. To align Ritu Vidya, sacred knowledge of menstruation, with nature's law, Rita, one begins to strengthen alignment with dharma. Being attuned to the cycles and rhythms of the natural world is to be in deeper connection and good health with one's self and body, whether you are a menstruating body or not. It determines your level of willpower, passion, energy, desire, and purpose to effect positive change into the world. Aligning with dharma is the most important step I listed in the popular article I wrote back in 2017 that I mentioned earlier on. Developing more self-awareness, ethical awareness, and adjusting our behaviors lead to making responsible life choices, which then lead to taking well thought out action steps. Being asleep to your sensitive superpowers will continually lead you to living life according to other people's needs, bypassing your needs to set boundaries, to rest, to process, digest thoughts and emotions at your own pace. Vulnerability is strength. Anyone who ridicules your soft, hyper-feminine state is looking at a mirror of their true fears, as well as the void that is the disconnection within themselves. Highly sensitive and empathic individuals are usually the scapegoats in a toxic work or family system or even friendship group. Rid yourself of critical people who are invested in maintaining the status quo. They are utterly colonized. You're going to enjoy the space of possibility and potential that this opens up. Just like in the fighting arts, learn to use your sensitive nature and your gifts, innate and cultivated ones, to your advantage. Change your belief that sensitivity is weakness into sensitivity as strength. That is how to win. So fight for yourself, transform pain into power, bet on yourself and your own powerfully sensitive nature, because no one else will. Hey, it's Bile. We've reached the conclusion of this podcast series, and I genuinely appreciate you tuning in. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback. Don't miss out on diving deeper into the concepts we've discussed. I've linked my article, The 6 Superpowers of Emotionally Sensitive People, in the description box below. Before you go, I've got a couple of offers that might interest you. My ebook, Rise Up, offers you a self-paced workbook designed to help you find your authentic path and purpose by creating clarity and direction through the process of journaling. And it now accompanies the Rise Up Warrior online course, where I teach you to move in alignment with your true calling and big vision as a highly sensitive cycle breaker. Start living the life that was meant for you. You're a leader, not a follower. Through the Rise Up Warrior course, develop alignment with your authentic voice and vision. And here's a bonus, you get Module 1 as a trial. So get started, get focused, the best time is always now. Rise Up, Warrior.